Okay, great. Hi Ryan, hi Reagan. Thank you for for letting us in to talk about Chainsaw Man. It's definitely one of the most interesting, fun, unique, crazy animes of this season and most seasons. It's definitely off the beaten track. So I wanted to talk to you about how you guys approach the role and how you guys came to the role. Um, First of all, I was wondering, have you guys read the manga?
Yes, many
Hmm.
times over. Actually, I have it right back there.
Hmm. So, oh, great, because that makes the discussion much more fun and interesting. So let's start with how did the audition process go? How did you guys come to these characters? Because they're fairly unusual characters even in most manga and anime, which we can get into a bit after later.
Sure. I was a huge fan of the series already, and this was actually like the dream role for me. So I had read it quite a few times over by the time the auditions came in, and I vividly remember when they came in, they were written kind of like in a paragraph, and I instantly knew what page they were from, and I knew how to, like, play out the scene instead of reading it like it was just one block of words. I was like, oh, okay, I know what this is. I have to do it like this. And I had already, it was like I had lived the scene in my head already. So I had an interpretation of who he was deep deep in my heart already, and it was, finally my chance to just kind of like let it out. And I had made my peace with, like, once I sent it off, even if I never got to play the role, to me that was, I got to do it.
Hmm. So,
Yeah,
yeah, please go on.
yeah.
Yes.
I knew nothing about the series when I got the auditions. I knew it existed. I knew that a lot of people really enjoyed it, and it was completely off the walls insane. Um, so when I got the auditions, I first thing I did was uh, read a bit of the manga as much as I could in that short time frame. And what really stuck out to me was how much Aki is, uh, how much he talks about preserving people's lives and not watching people die, and that really comes across in the audition lines. I think a lot of the times when I'm looking at auditions, I look at, what words does that character choose to say, and what does that reveal about them, and especially with Aki being such a guarded, very emotionally closed off person, how do I make that come through despite him being uh, so aloof?
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll jump back to Ryan in a bit, and I'll come back to you and Reagan, because what I want to talk to both of you about is kind of this weird buddy movie between Denji that developed. But first I want to talk to Ryan about how you approach Denji, because in the pilot, which is the first also the first chapter, he
Yeah,
he's basically this kid, and it's kind of this sad boy and his demon chainsaw dog story. But then by
yeah.
the end, it's completely different. It's gone into something else, because it starts out with him being completely alone except for his dog, and there's this common strand of abandoned kids whose parents left them in debt. That seems to be a very common strand in manga stories these days. But so how did you approach that character? Because he's practically like a child of barely born in the first chapter, and then in the episodes that we've got to so far, it's like he's slowly developing, learning how to be civilized. Because the common thread in this story and the majority of manga and anime seems to be about learning empathy and how to human, basically.
Yes. Yeah, totally. I all of that is, yeah, spot on. I think, when we first meet him, he is at his most broken and empty and hollowed out, and at the same time we see that glimmer of optimism and that kind of devil may care, wink in his eye, that there's something there of the maybe one day, even though he never really fully knows if he'll get there. So it was important for us, especially being a fan of the book, so knowing where everything goes and knowing how many different kind of peaks and valleys he's going to emotionally and intellectually go through. We wanted to start him in a place where you feel him internally like scrunched up and kind of on his last few fumes and just trying to get to the next day. And then when he has that cathartic transformation, it is the beginning of this empowerment. And I think now it's like he's on the journey as this world is opening up to him. It's like, I don't even know if civilized is even on his radar yet. I think he's just experiencing. He's just ready to have every kind of experience he can because life is hitting him with like sensory overload.
Yeah, and it's real, and it's hilarious because
Yeah.
because it's so kind of childlike and basic, even though he's like 16 years old, but he's like, oh, I wish I could have regular meals. I wish I could have I wish I could have a girlfriend. And even his kind of barely formed sexuality is hilarious. He's like, I'd like to touch boobs.
Well,
It's just so
it's
so
that thing,
weird.
there's I think there's so much underneath him, and it's his, he's hasn't had a day of being educated. So there's something really amazing about a character that can be so deeply honest with so little ammunition to express himself with. And I think it's like, we're seeing him do his best to be normal.
Yeah, and I also want to jump to Reagan to talk about Aki a little bit, because it's funny the way he initially reacts to Denji with complete and utter contempt. Basically, he just thinks this is some goofball, and then he feels totally justified in that fight where he's beating him up, and he says, I'm being a nice guy and I'm trying to discourage you from this, when basically he's being a complete bully, essentially. And the interesting thing is that scene is really about Aki's ego rather than Aki being a good guy. And the interesting thing is that Denji sees right through it, because
Yeah.
this is the really good comparison, which is that Denji is all id, and Aki is basically ego. And
Hmm.
so, apart from having the funniest kick to the nuts fight I have ever seen, multiple kicks to the nuts. Uh, uh, uh,
As someone who grew
it,
up on slapstick and Three Stooges and all this stuff, like it's the greatest.
yeah, and I'm kind of assuming that you guys didn't get to record together in the same room. Did you
No.
have to record lines and all? Okay. So how did you feel or approach that scene? Because even on your own as actress, you must have certain thoughts about there's an actual emotional arc that both characters go through in that scene from beginning to end. I was wondering if you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, totally. I think you hit the nail on the head with the id and ego thing. Aki is somebody who defines himself in many ways by being in control of himself. Uh, in control of his appearance, of his actions, uh, of his words. And he thinks that anybody who is not and doesn't have that kind of refinement and filter is just an idiot to be, discarded. You can think back to, your school days. Probably the kids who sat down and behaved and uh, got all the answers right. They usually look down on the people who don't sit down and stay still very well. And so it's kind of a similar thing going on of him having his ideas of what makes a good person and what makes a good
Mm.
devil hunter, being kicked in the balls. Uh,
Multiple times.
yes. So it's this wonderful dynamic of these two challenging each other's ideas of what a person should be and how they should react to the world around them.
Yeah, and I think you said it was so spot on what you said about how Denji just sees right through him, because the one thing Denji has that a lot of other people don't is he is the ultimate street smart. He comes from the gutters, man. So like he can read people's true nature, like that. And he is also, at a point where he is getting his first taste at how other people live, even if it's just a morsel. And he's like, this is how good people have it. I think what's beautiful about Denji's like growth and discovery is that he makes all of us who have our day-to-day lives, suddenly it makes us value all of our stuff that much more, because he's looking at the simplest of things that most people take for granted. And he's like, this is incredible. How do you not stop and value this for how awesome this is and hold on to this for dear life? And, the way that he ends that fight, he basically leaves him with like, I would happily die living this life, than go back the other way. So it's that realization of like, it's not about you or anybody else. None of you are getting in my way to now experience what I've been held back from for so long.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about Denji is that he has zero filter about
Zero
anything.
filter. Yeah. There's no need for it. He's so genuine. And I think in a way, a lot of us can learn from it. I think we're lucky to be able to express ourselves more eloquently, but I think all of us could use being more honest with ourselves and with each other. I think it's really something that most people are so guarded or are afraid to misspeak or whatever it is. And I think he is charmingly, disarmingly outrageous.
Yeah. And how do you find the balance between the comedy of Denji being completely unfiltered and outrageous without without getting unbearable, because the whole I just want those porn mags, and I want to touch boobs, which is already slightly dicey, but then that's common in Japanese pop culture after all. How do you find that balance, especially when you're just using your voice?
I think it's just important about making them genuine, making those moments, real, because that's what's going to make it funny or sad or whatever it is that is the intention of that actual moment. I think a lot of people look at Denji's goals or values and they belittle them because other people either just have had enough of these experiences or whatever it is. They're like, that's the stuff that you value, but they forget that he's literally, look, that toast is like fine dining to him. Like, so all of this is genuine wants and desires. And even though he's expressing them in crass ways, they're coming from deep emotional places. And I think that's the thing that I'm looking into and tapping into, is I'm trying to play them genuinely and deeply. And that helps make them funny or this or that or whatever it is. But it's not trying to judge or belittle him for having these feelings.
Mm-hmm. And I want to hop over to Reagan, since this is probably the last question to asking us to wrap up soon. So how do you play that against Ryan as Denji, since Aki is basically stoical and trying to live up to what he feels a hero should be. And also we know that the arc is that the two of them start to realize they're on the same side and working towards the same goal. How do you balance that, especially when you have to slowly unveil that as this arc goes on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Aki just has to realize that even though his motivation is this very traumatic thing that happened to him very early on in his life, that his way of going about things, even though maybe it works for him, that's not necessarily the way that everybody is going to go about things. And he doesn't and shouldn't, look down on people for approaching life in a different way than he does. And I think that the way that Denji forces him to confront that in so many different ways, in the fight and at home, and in the way that he is useful and kills the Bat Devil. He almost kills two devils all by himself. And so there's so many different ways that Aki has to confront his own preconceived notions about what a person should be. And I think that's a beautiful thing in fiction, and it's a beautiful thing in real life.
Yeah, and the beauty is that it's comedy, because his kind of stoical idea of himself is basically him being, it ends up with him getting constantly tortured by not just Denji, but also power at the same time.
It's the ultimate odd
Because-
couple.
He
Yeah.
has to learn to let go, and
Yeah.
to not constantly, not feel like he has to have complete control over everything in his life.
Yep. So I think we've reached the end because they're asking us to wrap up. So
Thank you so
thanks
much,
very
Adi.
much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And congratulations on basically being in probably the best anime of this season.
Oh, appreciated. That means the
Thank you
world.
so
Thank you
much.
so much.